listening to the Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program today. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Paul. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine. We want you to be a part of that liberty machine. We got a lot of news to get to today, specifically Governor Hutchinson, along with the Arkansas Department of Economic Development, with a big announcement about another Chinese company investing in Arkansas. Quote, investing. And we'll talk more about that. But joining us now, I want to welcome back to the program. We got State Representative Josh Miller is with us from District 66. Josh, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing great, Paul. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're welcome anytime. You know that. I'm glad that you could come on when I asked, because I wanted to get your thoughts on why so many people are now saying that a certain program is unsustainable. Now they're kind of on board with what conservatives, platform Republicans have been saying for several years now. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm glad others are seeing the light. You know, this is something that myself and a handful of others have been saying for years now, that this program is unsustainable. One day we're going to have to pay the piper, and we're not going to be able to afford it. I hate that it's gotten this far. So you know, I am glad that they're seeing the light. I do find it extremely humorous, and this is just, you know, why our political system is broke in our country and in our state, is that these guys, our less conservative Republican friends, are out saying, "Oh, this program is not manageable. We're on an unsustainable path." Yet, however, they came after me and a handful of other legislators in primaries and other races over the past few years because we were saying the same thing. So I'm willing to bet they're not going to admit that we were right, and somehow or another, I bet they're going to say that we're still wrong, but they're now right.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
No, it really doesn't. I think they have to do that, or else they would actually lose credibility, and they would be admitting that they were wrong, and that would lose. Rightfully so. They should be less credible, because now they're the ones that want to lead us out of the mess that they themselves have perpetuated. They themselves are the ones that have actually created this mess. I've heard the governor. I've seen some other tweets from some folks who have always supported this program, and they seem to be complaining about what the Republicans in D.C. have done concerning the repeal and replacement of Obamacare. They are all, I think Charlie Collins was on Twitter saying this. The governor went on TV and said that the plan as is that came out of the House of Representatives is not where it needs to be. And, of course, as conservatives, we're hoping that the Senate doesn't dismantle some of the good things that they did. But it seems like that Asa and some others are hoping they do dismantle specifically the end of Medicaid expansion, the phase-out in 2020. What are your thoughts on that, State Representative Miller?
Well, I think you've got some big government, money-hungry Republicans, some of whom you have just named, so I don't need to be redundant, that love the idea of free federal money. And their undergarments are in a wad right now because they see that pot is drying up, which you didn't have to be a prophet in 2013, 2014, 2015, or 2016 to see that at some point that pot of money was going to dry up.
Yeah.
Every person that we have signed up on Medicaid expansion in the state of Arkansas, the federal dollars that came into Arkansas were not allocated to us from some magical pot in Washington, D.C. They were borrowed from places like China. And at some point, thankfully, Congress has has seen the light and is willing to put forth a plan that's going to say, hey, we can't continue to do this. We can't give state money at a 90-10 rate, match rate anymore. And so I applaud them for doing it, and I think it's laughable. I mean, it's got folks like the governor and other legislators in a pickle because now they're having to badmouth Republicans in D.C. and we're going to have a state Republican feud between our state leaders and our federal leaders, and I think that's a shame. You know, in D.C. they've got to manage the budget just like we do. They can't afford to keep doing it anymore.
You raised an interesting point.
Those are my thoughts.
I hadn't actually thought about what you just raised, which was if you look at the four members of our House delegation, but all of them supporting this, and then the state, you got State Representative Charlie Collins and others, and Governor Hutchinson worried that what they voted for puts too much of the cost on the state. And, of course, what that means is that we would have to eliminate programs for able-to-work adults who are choosing not to work. We'd have to quit giving away free stuff that many people don't believe it's the business of the government to provide. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you completely. I've taken a lot of heat through the years for my stance against Medicaid expansion, having been a Medicaid beneficiary myself. There was when I had my accident when I was 22 years old, I was uninsured and I had a catastrophic event. There was a safety net there, and I'm grateful for it. We want to preserve. I said those of us who have always opposed Medicaid expansion, Medicaid expansion has not served one purpose, or has not served one person as a safety net for catastrophic injury. Anybody that signed up for the program that was in that bad a shape immediately got deferred over to traditional Medicaid. There's not one soul with a serious disability on the Medicaid expansion program that is insured by our private insurance companies. They've all been deferred over to traditional Medicaid. My stance through the years has been, hey, I want to preserve the program that was there for me because I want it to be there for others. Our kids down through the years, and they're not going to have a debt that they're going to have to pay back. And, I don't think it's our responsibility to provide health insurance for folks who just simply choose not to work.
Yeah.
It's not the responsibility of the government to take care of folks from the cradle to the grave. If they aren't trying to, if they're able to work and are just choosing not to.
Switching gears now, we're talking with State Representative Josh Miller. Switching gears, the task farce was announced, or the task force, the tax farce was announced. You feel free to disagree with me, obviously. I mean, do you have high confidence, high hopes that the people who got selected to be on that committee are going to advocate and fight for limiting the size of government, lowering our taxes, which might mean putting forth a plan where the government gets less money from us than it's getting right now? Your thoughts?
Well, for one, I've been busy with work in the private sector these last few weeks, and I haven't taken the time to read who was selected to be on the Color of the Week task force, and so I apologize in advance to any friends of mine who may be on there, but I have zero confidence in that. I mean, it's just it's a waste of money. Look, the legislature is the task force. We are the people's task force. We don't need to create another task force. And here's what's going to happen. They're going to get together, and they're going to meet a while, and then somebody's going to recommend that somebody's friends get a consulting contract of $1 million or $2 million to come in and analyze our tax structure and report every other month to the task force, and they're going to need to meet, and we're going to need to pay their per diem, and it's just a joke. I'm sorry. It's pathetic. The legislature is the task force. I was elected by District 66 to go down and do the task of trying to run our government as efficiently as possible. And, I would be saying the same thing if they asked me to be on the task force, which I'm confident they did not. But anyway, it's just, it's just a joke. Hey, you look at the dadgum healthcare task force. You know how many bills came out of the healthcare task force? You, Mr. Paul Harrell, do you know? I'm going to interview you for a second.
How many bills came out of the task force? I don't know. I guess, Arkansas Works, right? Wasn't that their solution? Wasn't that a bill at some point? Did that come out of the task force?
Well, no, that's what created the task force, was SB 96. Actually, the answer to that is one bill. Representative Joe Farrar ran a bill this past session that changed, don't get me else in the weeds, but it changed the way Medicaid billing was done. It was a good bill. I supported it. But you think about we spent millions on the healthcare task force, and they produced one bill that, and Representative Farrar could have produced that on his own, without ever attending a task force meeting. And Representative Farrar is a good friend of mine. He's a smart guy. So that's what I'm saying. I have complete confidence he did not need the task force to have done that bill. But that is the only bill that came out of the task force. Other than that, in 2000, I guess it was 16, when they presented whatever, that was the governor's plan. He wasn't on the task force. So you can't say the task force came up with it. They just voted to go along with the governor's plan.
What he wanted them to do. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's
exactly.
A really good point.
Might as well have just saved the $1 million and something that we paid the Stevens Group, and saved paying per diem all the hundreds of thousands of dollars, I guarantee you, that were spent on per diem for legislators to go down there and pat each other on the back and sing Kumbaya for an hour and a half or two a month. It's just as a joke.
Yeah.
And this tax, multi-rainbow colored, rip colored, whatever task force that we're doing.
I feel like you listen to the program. I feel like you're a listener.
Not as often as I should. I should listen more, because it's very educational. But it's just a joke, man. I'm sorry. And for people to, sit here and say, "Oh, this is so good." Well, we could be looking at different ways. There were a lot of bills, a lot of tax cut bills that were filed this year that many of them weren't even heard in committee.
Yeah.
Because we need to have the task force look at everything.
On the on this issue of the tax task farce, Joe, you have this audio clip ready. So back in February, when the veterans tax cut came in, but we had to raise taxes on candy and we had to raise taxes on digital downloads and that sort of thing. The governor said that the governor said it would have been irresponsible just to absorb that in the budget. This is what he said. Go ahead, Joe.
Please note that the other conservative and responsible approach was when it came to providing the tax cuts that's still going through the system for the military retirees, that we wanted to make sure that was paid for. So we didn't say, well, we're just going to absorb that. We have to pay for it. We have to close off exemptions. And so there are many that, not many, but there were some that were saying, we don't like to have those offsets. We don't like to have a paid for. We just want to absorb that into our budget. That's not a conservative, responsible approach, and we took that approach. I feel very comfortable with.
Okay, so he's basically saying, look, that's not conservative to absorb a tax cut. And my concern is, Representative Miller, if that is the philosophy of this task force, we know what we're going to get.
Well, exactly. And then here's the deal, too. And I've got to agree with the governor. I think he left out one key phrase when he said it's not responsible, conservative governing to just absorb this. And I think what he had intended to say I won't say what he had intended to say. What he should have said, what I would have liked to have heard him say at the end of that statement was, if you're into continuing to expand failed programs and grow big government, if that's your conservative philosophy, then he's right. If you're into limiting government, then you limit the amount of money government has to work with, and then you set the priorities for what we feel like are the most critical needs that we as a state government must meet for the citizens in the state of Arkansas. And and that's what they're unwilling to do. Hey, I get it. If you're running a business and you're going to stop getting income somewhere, you need to be able to still pay your bills. And so if you have to live on less of an income, you need to have fewer bills. It works the same way in government. I laughed until I cried the other day. And I did laugh because it's just humorous, and it's sad that it's humorous. But I heard the governor say, in regards to the $70 million he was having to cut out of the budget, out of this year's budget, not to mention the fact that the budget that was just passed grows by over 3%, but that's a side note. But anyway, he says we don't have a spending problem. We have a revenue problem. I had to go back and read it twice to fully comprehend and make sure that that wasn't a misprint. We don't have a spending problem. We have a revenue problem. Well, I guess that's the way it is for everybody who gets a credit card with a $20,000 credit limit, and they go run that credit card up to its max, and then the credit card company wants $600 or $800 a month to pay the note on that, and the person can only afford to pay $500. And they say, hey, it's not my fault. I don't have a spending problem. I've got a revenue problem. I'm not getting enough money to pay this bill. I mean, it's a joke, Paul.
I completely agree with you.
It's absolutely ludicrous to say we don't have a spending problem, we have a revenue problem. Well, you have to base your spending off your revenue. And a good way to do that would be to look at last year's budget, the year before that, the previous 3 years.
But they keep growing.
Get an idea about what the...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but, when you increase it by 3% every year, at some point you're going to have to say, oh, crap, we can't pay this bill.
State Representative Josh Miller, you're always a pleasure to have on the program, and I do appreciate it, and I can't wait to do it again.
Hey, Paul, thanks a lot, bud.
Yes,
Take
sir.
care.
Be safe. Folks, it's always great to have him on. We've got to take a break, though. I went over, but you can tell why, because he always has a lot of great stuff to say. Back in just a moment.